Hi there, Zoran here. Let's talk about developing a web application in top-down style. Why top-down? Why not start from the domain model? I am a backend developer, so why not start with the domain model then? Well, there are troubles with that approach. That would be something more of a bottom-up development, and it doesn't really work well with applications such as web applications or any UI applications. The problem is that such a domain model does not exist for itself. It doesn't have a purpose other than serving the UI. Top-down development helps us organize work, so to start from the UI to make sure that UI is working and displaying the right information, showing them in the right way. Only then we step down to design a domain model that supports that UI. And when we do that, we go down one step lower to persistence layer to support persistence, to make sure that that domain model can be persisted so that it survives restarts of the application or multiple sessions of the application. This application you see here is modeling a bookstore, and I will develop only one page in the application, this one which is supposed to list the books. Here it is, an empty page with that title I just made so that you can see that we are in the right place. Alright then, let's design this page. Why the page again? Why not start from the domain model, define some book model, save it to the database, implement persistence? Why not that way? Because we still don't know which attributes we need from the book. Where do we find them? We need to display items first on the screen before deciding what backing model we need to support that. That is top-down development. And let's start with top-down development. The customer is requesting this page to display a table with the books in the bookstore. They need author's name and the title of the book. So we go to the backing model for this Razor page. Look, I will prototype a view model, no domain model yet, a view model, which consists of the author name and the title. And I will put some fake data in. This is lorem ipsum for books. I'm careful to cover all the use cases the customer has told me. An author with both first and last name, author with no last name, and 1001 Nights book with no known author. Do you see what I'm doing now? I'm thinking about the requirements. I'm actively ignoring the question of the domain model because I still don't know what the data will look like. It would be better to isolate these fake data in a separate property because later I'm definitely going to delete this property. Then we step down into the get action handler to populate this public property books with fake data now, but this is about how we will do the same thing later when the data will come from the database, from the real data source. This get action handler will look pretty much the same as it looks now. Back in the HTML, we only need to display the data precisely as the customer has requested. All fake data, but look, this view, it is over. There will be nothing to change in this view later. That is that top-down development, the top layer. The HTML is over. And we can step down and implement the rest of the application, the rest of this page, ignoring the HTML itself in the further development. If I run the application and navigate to that page, the customers will verify that the page is looking as expected. We step to the page model, and everything I will do from this point on will be at this level and lower. Top-down development. I want to substitute this prototype, this tuple I used to serve the data, into a proper view model. So here's the namespace for view models. A simple record will suffice. Why book header? Why not just the book? There will be multiple ways to view at the book. Maybe you count its pages, maybe you measure its weight. Those are separate views of the same book. This view only needs to display the basic data, title and author name. Maybe there will be another small piece of data relating to the book, but that will still remain a book header, which becomes a row in the table on the screen. In the page backing model, substitute tuple with the view model. So we have moved one step lower. The time is to define a proper domain model. I will pretend that this situation with the books and authors is much more complicated than it is, and so I will implement the domain model in 2 steps, just pretending that each step will be complex in its own right and requires a lot of work, a lot of thinking and designing. The reason for this exercise is that I want to show you that you can also implement the domain model and the entire application incrementally in small steps. You don't really have to do an exact top-down like complete HTML, complete page model, complete domain model, complete persistence, and poof, there is the entire application. No, you don't have to do that. You can also make vertical slices. And so to implement one vertical slice like just modeling a book without the author, let me show you. This is the book domain model. The choice is to use the same domain model as a persistence model as well. As your domain model grows larger, this decision will start showing deficiencies, and you will probably want to separate persistence model from the domain model. That is fine, but at this level of complexity, I'm still not ready to do that. I will use the same domain model as the persistence model. So there will be the identity of the book, and it will have a private setter so that Entity Framework can populate this property. And then we get to the substance, the title. There will be a mandatory title of the book. And then there comes that imaginary complexity, which doesn't really exist in this model. Let's suppose that modeling authors of books is somehow complicated and we want to postpone that piece of work now. Let's just skip the author of the book. But then comes the domain modeling. The rest of the domain will ignore these setters. It won't even have access to them. The rest of the model will create a new book with the title and obtain a new object with identity 0, indicating that this object has not been populated yet. Later, when we persist this object, it will attain a non-zero identity. Again, later, when we populate this object from the database, the same identity and title values will be loaded from the database and populated in the object. That is, I suppose you know how Entity Framework persistence works. That is straightforward scenario. Back in the page model view, we want fake book instances to test instead of this list of lorem ipsum books. Here, I will create 3 fake instances. Again, these instances do not come from the database. But now I don't have the author name. What do we do? Well, why not prepare fake author names, like 3 kinds of them, 2 component, 1 component, and no author, and just rotate them indefinitely. Getting the book view models will be more engaged. This time we will start from the books as we have them and zip them with the titles, and then create book header view models for display. Do you see what I'm doing? I have just separated one part of the fake data belonging to the domain model. Very soon, these domain model instances will start coming from the database, and the rest of the view model is just the data I'm still missing. There's no model for them, and I'm faking them and zipping them together with the domain models to create view models. But anyway, the application is working the same as before, and customers can again verify that we haven't broken anything in the view. This is still the same view as they requested. Let's persist the books. This is the empty DB context. The book model is straightforward, so just expose it and include it in the model. And this should be everything the entity framework expects from us. I will add the migration, update the database. And look, there is this create table statement, SQL statement. It's creating the books table in the database. Let's insert a few rows into it. There you go. 3 rows are there. That will cause a change in the page backing model. That will require a DB context injected from the outside, and then the get action will load actual books from the database. I must include toList to materialize the books from the database before stepping to the zip operator, because this zip would not translate into a SQL statement, so the query will fail. It will throw an exception from entity framework. Observe, the code that is serving fake data is gradually disappearing. Even that rest of it, fake outer names, will disappear by the end. And this zip will also disappear. It will have to disappear. That's just faking the view. Run the application. Page still works correctly. But this time, for the first time, it is displaying a mixture of fake data and real data loaded from the database. We are advancing. We have completed one tiny vertical slice through the entire application, from HTML over the page model, over view model, over domain model, entity framework persistence model, and table in the database. The entire application has been covered with this strip of work we just completed so far. Alright, let's make a 5-second pause at this place to collect our thoughts, and if you liked the video so far, please press the like button. That will help me. Thank you very much. Let's move on to the final stage of development. We are missing that person domain model, and that model must be used in the view model and later in the page. Adding all those properties it needs identity for persistence, it needs a mandatory first name and an optional last name, because some persons, so we figured out by talking to customers, some persons don't even have the last name, like Aristotle doesn't. There will be that private constructor for entity framework to use, but the rest of the domain model will use static factories that receive the first name, one of them, and the other, both first name and the last name. In both cases, static factory methods will instantiate a correct person instance of the domain model. Now, I didn't mention any validation so far. Any validation fits into these static factory methods. If there is anything you want to say to the caller, this is the place where you say it. There will be no validation when entity framework populates the new instance. The instance should be valid before it gets into the database. If invalid object is persisted, then you have a bigger trouble than validating it on load. Let's move on. Back in the book will have an optional outer. An outer could be null. And so there will be an alternative way to create a book from inside the domain model. I want to persist both the outer and the relationship between books and authors. Now, depending on whether you already have production data, this operation could become quite engaged. There is an entire video, and you can watch it, on the very problem of adding a property to an existing domain model that is already persisted, and there are data in production that now you have to manage. That video is also dealing with the question how you deploy the new version of the application and the new version of database without causing any downtime in production. Now that is another question. Then in the DB context, there will be a database table for authors. I will set up authors, and that will be very easy, but setting up the books will be more engaged this time, because there is the navigation property that will map to author ID foreign key in the database table, so we must set this up here. And then when we create the migration and apply it to the database, you will see an interesting thing happening. Here is the create table for authors. That is nice. First name not nullable, last name nullable. That is all as expected. But there are alter table statements executed on the books table. Here, added the nullable author ID column and also added the index for author ID and a foreign key constraint. Now the two tables are there in the database and they are connected with the foreign key constraint. For the rest of the demonstration, I will insert two authors and update their books so that they are actually authoring those books. And then we get back to the page backing model. With the final change, there will be no fake data anymore. There will be no zip instruction, there's nothing to mix into the data coming from the database. However, loading the data from the books table will now have to include their authors, if they exist, of course. This is the final query of the data from the database. But that's not what we need to display in the page. We need view models. So I will presume there is some extension method called toBookHeaders. This will make this page final. And then mapping domain models to view models, well, for one thing, that belongs to view models, that operation, that mapping. That doesn't belong to domain models because domain models know nothing about view models. They don't care about them. Domain model is self-sufficient, so to say. It is a world for itself. View models will include any mapping methods like these extension methods I prepared here that will help you turn a domain model into any shape of the view model you need. That is the book header in this case, one method to map one book into one book header, and another method to map a sequence of book objects into a sequence of book header view models. It is very simple in the end. The backing model is complete, it's compiling fine, and all data used in this page are actually coming from the database. The moment of truth, the application is here, it is working fine, there are no fake data anywhere left in the application, all the data are coming from the database through the domain model materialized by Entity Framework, then mapped to the view model, and finally rendered in the Razor page. I hope you have enjoyed this demonstration. It is really showing one powerful development method. It's not a design method, it's a development method. Start from the top, read the requirements, the customer's requirements, do the UI, fill it with lorem ipsum, with the fake data, anything that will make your customer confirm that you are on the right track. Then implement view models that support that page, then implement domain model that supports transferring data into that view model, and finally do the persistence. That is the top-down development method. Very simple indeed. I hope you enjoyed this video. Like it, don't forget to like the video, and see you in the next episode.